John, are you okay with the technology? Yeah, good. That then brings us to our next piece of data. As you know, the Commerce Commission's commissioned 2 pieces on SME and residential, and our next piece, with another sort of 20-minute slot just to give you an overview of the research, is Jon Hackett from Roy Morgan. So please welcome John to the podium.
Thank you, David. My technology consists of about 20 handouts, so it's not a problem. Right. Good morning, everyone. Guess I'll get started as everyone's settling in. I've been asked here today to present the consumer findings for the demand-side study. So in today's presentation, I will cover the findings from the survey that Roy Morgan Research was commissioned to carry out. Now, as you're aware, the New Zealand Commerce Commission conducted a study into demand for high-speed broadband, and Roy Morgan was tasked with specifically looking at aspects of the consumer demand. Now, the study aimed to identify issues that might affect the uptake of high-speed broadband in New Zealand. The study included current broadband satisfaction, consumer interest in new high-speed broadband services, how much more consumers are willing to pay for this high-speed broadband, consumers' understanding of key broadband characteristics, any barriers that might inhibit the uptake of high-speed broadband, and the sources of information on the potential benefits of high-speed broadband. So I'll first briefly explain the recruitment process and the methodology that we use for this survey. For many years, Roy Morgan Research has been conducting a nationally representative, syndicated survey, which we call single source. Respondents are first recruited via a telephone establishment survey, and then we send them self-completion questionnaires through the mail. We get back approximately 1,000 self-completion questionnaires per month, or the equivalent of 12,000 per annum. The survey covers both the North and the South Islands in New Zealand, and as well as 16 regional council areas. For all of our respondents, we then have a contact telephone number and a postal address. So what we were able to do for this project was then recontact some of our single source respondents. And being able to do this allowed, first of all, it gave us supplementary information without having to re-ask certain questions of our respondents. And it also allowed us to, it gave us the ability for targeted recruiting. So in this case, the qualifying respondent was a single source recontact from May 2010 to April 2011. They're over the age of 18. They have a fixed line at home. They have a mobile phone. They have broadband internet at home. And the internet account was included on the last home telephone bill. Now, as for the time period for this survey, the fieldwork was carried out between October 17th and November 4th, 2011. Age by gender by North-South Island quotas were put on the sample, and then the sample was further post-weighted to account for age, gender, rural-urban divides according to our single-source figures. Therefore, I can confidently say that it's achieved a good nationally representative sample of the important subgroup that I just laid out. And please note that therefore, throughout this presentation, when I refer to either consumers or New Zealand consumers, I'm really referring to the connected consumers that I've just described, i.e. those who have a fixed line, who have broadband internet, who have a mobile phone, and the internet account was included on their last home telephone bill. All in all, this represents over 1,600,000 consumers across New Zealand. And the final sample size for the customized questionnaire here was just over 1,000 respondents. Now, the first area that I'd like to look at is broadband satisfaction. And the question that we asked here was, thinking about your current broadband internet service, please tell me how satisfied you are with the following. We then looked at 6 different variables: customer support, the time taken to download, upload internet pages, videos, and files, data caps, the price, the internet coverage on your mobile phone, and please note here that these figures are solely based on those respondents who do in fact have internet on their mobile phone, and then the access to premium content over broadband. We also used a 5-point rating scale, which is summarized here as satisfied, neither satisfied nor unsatisfied, unsatisfied, and can't say. And what we found is that there's a widespread satisfaction amongst consumers with most aspects of their current broadband services. When looking at the urban-rural divide, we notice that there's a slightly higher percentage of consumers in the urban areas who are satisfied with all aspects of their current broadband service compared to those in the provincial and the rural areas. To give you some numbers, 19% of those from Auckland stated that they were satisfied with all aspects of their current broadband service, compared to 21% in Wellington, 17% in Christchurch, 16% in the provincial areas, and 15% in the rural areas. Now, this trend is driven by a slightly lower satisfaction of data caps and a lower satisfaction of the time taken to download and upload files, internet pages, videos in the provincial and the rural areas. Now, the next area that we looked at was New Zealand consumers' interest in new services. And the question that we asked here was, on a scale from 1 to 10, how interested might you be in subscribing to each one of these services, assuming that it was not too expensive? We then measured the level of consumer interest for 5 different services, which, as you can see up here, included HD movies and TV on demand over broadband, HD virtual real-time education, HD conference calls over broadband, a doctor's consultation over the internet, and HD interactive gaming. And we found that the greatest interest amongst the consumers is in movies and TV on demand, as well as in real-time education. We found that there aren't really any significant regional differences here when we look at the interest in new services over broadband. However, there are differences when we looked at the age and the gender groups. So here we split our respondents into 4 different age groups, the 18 through 24, 35 through 34, 35 through 49, and 50 plus. And as you can see here, interest in new broadband services is greater amongst the youngest respondents, and it declines amongst the older ones. When looking at the gender splits, women are more interested in virtual real-time education than men, while men are more interested in gaming. So no real surprises there. The next thing that we looked at was the amount that these consumers are willing to pay for high-speed broadband that enables them to use these new services. And here the question we asked was, how much more than you currently pay per month would you be willing to pay for high-speed broadband that enabled you to use these services? The respondents could then choose from up to $5 more per month, $5 to $10 more per month, $11 to $20 more per month, or over $20 more per month. And what we found is that there's a limited willingness to pay for high-speed broadband amongst consumers that enables them to use these new services, with about 3/4 or 77% of them saying that they would pay only up to $10 more per month. Furthermore, we looked at the age and the gender breakdown for this question. And what we found by age is that the willingness to pay for high-speed broadband really declines amongst the older age groups. Now, to put this into some sort of context, we looked into our own Roy Morgan single-source database, and we found that people over the age of 50 spend considerably less time on average using the internet than those under the age of 50, as you might expect. To give you some number, people over the age of 50 in New Zealand spend an average of 9 hours per week using the internet, compared to those under the age of 50 who spend an average of 16 hours a week using the internet. And also, as we saw earlier in this presentation, those over the age of 50 are simply less interested in the new high-speed broadband services than the younger ones. Now, when we look at gender, what we found is that men are more willing to pay a higher amount for high-speed broadband than women are, with about 22% of them that's saying that they would pay over $10 more per month more for high-speed broadband compared to only 16% of women. Similarly, when we looked into our single source database, we found that men on average spend more time than women using the internet. Men spend on average in New Zealand about 14 hours a week using the internet, and women spend an average of about 12 hours per week using the internet. Now, we broke this question of willingness to pay further down by looking at those who are interested in at least one service, as you can see on the pie chart on the left, and those who are interested in no new services, as the one on the right there. And we found that people that are interested in at least one new service are willing to pay more for high-speed broadband, as you might expect, with 24% of them saying that they're willing to pay over $10 more per month than they currently pay. Now, furthermore, when we split this down regionally, we found that consumers in Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch are willing to pay a higher amount for high-speed broadband than those in the provincial and the rural areas. However, keep in mind here that people in the urban areas also earn, on average, a higher income than those in the provincial and the rural areas. The next area that we looked at was the barriers to uptake for New Zealand consumers. And the question that we asked here was, if you were to find that having broadband that enabled you to use these new services would require one or more of the following, to what extent would these be a barrier? And then we looked at the potential barriers that we offered were the cost of rewiring your premises, upgrading your IT equipment, low monthly data caps, paying a penalty, disruption of rewiring your premises, and changing your service provider. And what we found was that the barriers that involve the additional costs are really the most significant for the consumers. For example, the top two here are cost of rewiring premises and upgrading your IT equipment. Now, you'll notice here that these are both ongoing as well as one-off costs. We found that there aren't really any significant regional differences for the barriers to uptake. However, there are some when we look at age and gender. Now, once again, here we split our respondents into our different age groups, 18 to 24, 25 to 34, 35 to 49, and 50 plus. And as you can see, low monthly data caps are not nearly as significant to the consumers over the age of 50 as to the younger ones. Now, as I said before, people over the age of 50 in New Zealand are spending much less time using the internet, therefore probably have a lot less need for those higher data caps than the younger ones. Also, when looking at the gender divide, we found that the disruption of rewiring the premises is more significant a barrier to female consumers than it is to males. Now, when we looked into our single source database to try to shed some light on this, we found that based on their attitudes towards their home, women tended to be more house proud on average than men. Now, this is based on an attitudinal statement that we offer in single source, saying that I can't relax until I know my home is clean and tidy, which 49% of women in New Zealand agree with, compared to only 29% of men. Shamefully enough. I'm one of those 29%. So what are some of the key messages that came out of this project? Well, first of all, New Zealand consumers have expressed a widespread satisfaction with most aspects of their current broadband services. A slightly lower level of satisfaction in the provincial and rural areas is driven by lower satisfaction of data caps and the time taken to download, upload files, internet pages, videos. HD movies and TV on demand, as well as HD virtual real-time education, are likely to be the greatest drivers to uptake, and this is particularly true for those under the age of 50. New Zealand consumers have really shown a limited willingness to pay for high-speed broadband that enables them to use the new services, and this willingness to pay declines amongst the older age groups. New Zealand consumers have identified several barriers to high-speed broadband uptake. The most significant of these are ones that involve the additional costs, and as I said before, both ongoing as well as one-off costs. And finally, there are differences when looking at the gender and age split, with people under the age of 50 being more concerned with data caps, and female consumers being more concerned with disruption of rewiring their premises. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. I suppose not a particularly unsurprising set of results, especially since they were partly included in the issues paper number 3. We do have a few seconds for some questions for John, if there are any. I think we'll let Bronwyn have another run, and then this gentleman up at the front, and that'll be it.
Bronwyn Hull, New Zealand Institute for the Study of Competition and Regulation. Have you in this survey also controlled for household income and levels of education? It's just I note that in the United States research what they find is while these patterns apply for the proclivity to purchase a connection, when it comes to the actual usage of the connection, usage actually declines with increasing education and age because of issues around the valuation of time, and that has a significant impact also on the proclivity to use different types of applications such as video, because it's availability of time to use it that contributes to some of those issues.
Sure. That's a great question. When you say control, there are a couple answers to that. First, we didn't set strict quotas on the onset of the survey to account for different income brackets in New Zealand. However, the survey was then, all the numbers were then post-weighted according to national statistics and to our single source database, which is based on the 2006 population census. So I am, as I said before, very confident that it's a nationally representative sample. And if you'd like to look further at breaking it down by income, that's something that I can discuss with you afterwards, that we can try to throw some numbers at you off the top of my head. I just don't have that.
Thank you, Bronwyn, for asking my question. And the gentleman at the front here was the third row. No, third row? Sorry.
Stephen Fry, Hobbitville. Just interested in whether it's right or not. 81% of consumers said that a barrier to uptake is low data caps. Is that right? 81%? That was the point from Stephen, that was all. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
I'll go back to the barriers to uptake slide to show you. Oops, wrong way. So low monthly data caps, we're seeing that 53% of them said that it is a significant barrier, 28% saying it's a minor barrier. So, yep, 81%. Yep, that's correct, to some extent.
So you're channeling Stephen Fry. Look, it would be nice to have more questions on, no, we should stick to timetable. John, I'm sure, is not running away, are you?
Oh, well, I was thinking about it, but now you put me on the spot.
But that research itself will also be available on the website later on today, and I'm sure that John would be able to handle further questions if you want them. Because we do have a panel to get to, and we've got some speakers who've made the time to get here, so we should move on to that. So please thank Jon Hackett.
Thank you.
Okay.